Welcome, welcome, welcome to episode 18 of the Women Inspired Podcast. Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, April Seifert. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who is inspired to action, and that's my number one goal, to inspire you, my listeners, to take action in your lives. Each week, I get to interview some of the most inspiring women, and I'm bringing those interviews to you. Let's do it. After 3 years of hustling to make an impact in the coaching and online business world, and building a 6-figure coaching business and a successful online school for entrepreneurs in the process, Amanda Loveland packed up a backpack, sold everything she owned, and left her socially acceptable life behind to become a digital nomad and discover how to build a business that allowed her to be a human. She was recognized in 2015 by Mary Morrissey with the Dream Builder Award of Excellence for her uncommon success in the coaching field and is certified as a Dream Builder coach, a parent coach, and a nonprofit leader. Well, hey, everybody. I am so excited today to welcome a fabulous entrepreneur and wonderful person to the podcast, Amanda Loveland. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So I've told everybody a bit about you, but it's always really nice to get to know somebody in their own words. So help us get to know you a little bit. Tell us about you, about your background, family, whatever it is you want to include.
Oh, goodness gracious. So I guess the biggest thing about me right now is that I'm quite the wanderer. So I'm a nomad of sorts in a very literal way. I don't have a home. So I wander around the world, or right now really just around the country, and learn new things and see new places and visit. This is probably the one that I'm with right now the most, which is visit with the people that I love, that I absolutely love and adore, my family, my friends that I've met all over, and figure out how to operate a business and continue friendships all over the world, and also figure out how to take care of myself in the midst of being a nomad. So it's probably the biggest thing to know about me right now. And I've also developed a couple of different businesses. So my first business was in coaching. So I was doing like one-on-one coaching and group coaching in life and business concepts. And that was really where I hung out for a few years when I first started my business. And then that transformed into an online school for entrepreneurs called Wealth University. So I've been in the online world, I've been in the offline world when it comes to coaching. And now I'm really entering into a new phase of my life that we'll call writing, learning how to be a writer, whether it be as books or publications, or who knows what that's going to turn into. So I'm very much still on the path of figuring out who I want to be and all the many things I want to do as an entrepreneur. And I've had a couple of successes along the way, and I'm grateful to share what I've learned.
That's phenomenal. You've got a really cool background, and there's a whole lot of things actually that I want to dig into that. So I guess prior to talking to you, one place that I'll start, and one thing that stuck out to me about you, is that prior to talking to you today, I did some research on you. And one thing that really stuck out in what I saw is that you are building what you call a hustle-free empire. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that.
So hustle-free empire really means something different to everyone who hears the concepts. And I think that's really important to point out. So I now really what Wealth University became, and then the message that I've been spreading most recently, is building whatever it is that you're focused on building. So for some people, that's in a corporate career. And that's something that, they're really passionate about, is having that stability in their lives. And for other people like me, it's having more of an entrepreneurship kind of life, where you get to create the business that you'd like to be in. And no matter which route you're taking with those, I think it's important to build them without hustling, without struggling, because, we've taken these concepts, like, for example, the word thriving or the word hustle, and we've made them into these like valuable traits of people, that people who don't sleep are the people that we go, oh my gosh, how are they doing that? And do I have to stay up till 4 a.m. building my business in order to be successful? I'm not willing to do that. So I guess I'm not meant to be there. Like, for me, it very literally means not working that much and not having that be the determining factor in my income. Like the number of hours that I put in is the thing that determines how much money I'm going to make. Hustle free for me means not working that much. And most recently, that means a couple of hours every week. And a year ago, that meant a couple of hours every day. And a couple, years before that, it meant that I was able to work 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. 4 days a week. Like it's always evolving for me of what exactly that looks like. But for me, hustle free means not having to work that much in order to make plenty of money. And for other people, it might mean, for example, my sister is more the corporate route. She likes the stability of her corporate work. But that means for her that she, number one, doesn't have to work full time in that corporate career. And number two, that she doesn't have to work until the age of 60 or 70 or whatever retirement might be for the normal average, like American citizen. She doesn't want to work that long in order to have the freedom she wants to have in her life. She wants to set up her hustle-free lifestyle to be able to generate the money she needs now to, in her 40s or in her early 50s, say, I'm going to have the kind of life I want to have now and not have to work in order to do it. So it means something different for everybody. But for me, it very much means not working that much and not having that affect my income. And in many ways, grow my income. Very much so.
Okay. So that completely blew my mind. And I'm sure people who are listening to this, many of you probably feel the same way, where you hear this person saying, oh, okay, I'm going to work less. And that is not going to be what dictates my income. What do you've got a background in this. You've worked with a number of people over the years and just teaching them how to set up this lifestyle. What is the biggest maybe misconception that people have, or what's the biggest mistake that they're making? Maybe it is in trying to break that connection between hours and income. Does that question make sense?
I think it does. So you're asking, when people say, okay, so in order to make money, I don't have to work more. When they begin to transition from what they're doing into that space, what are the mistakes that I see people make?
Right. Like what's the biggest shift that they have, or how do you start that ball rolling into this new world that you're describing from the old one that we're so accustomed to, where the longer we work, the harder we work, the more hours we spend with our butt in the chair in a cubicle, the traditional sort of rat race kind of things. What is the biggest barrier or shift that people make as they're moving toward this new mindset?
That's a really good question, because I think it's different for everybody, but the two things that come to mind for me really revolve around attachment. And it's attachment in both worlds. It's attachment in when I talk about, and what I'm talking about is the most popular concept in the entrepreneurial world right now. Like, I'm going to different people, whether it be through speaking engagements or through podcasts like this or through coaching or people who come into Wealth University. I'm going into these groups of people who, many of them, are working 50, 60, 70 plus hours every single week to grow their business. They're not even making that much money yet, but they're doing that to grow their business. And then I'm saying you don't have to work that much to make money. And quite frankly, it pisses people off. Like, it makes people go, like, you don't know what you're talking about, or you're in the right industry, or you don't understand, or I have this other job, so like you just don't get it. And I get that. I do get that, because I've been in many different worlds and I've worked with many different people. And like I said, hustle free means something different to everybody. So for some people, it might not be attached to the number of hours you work. For some people, it might be that you're allowed to do the things in your business that you love to do and nothing more. That feels hustle free. A common thing that people will say to me is, well, I love working, so like I get what you're saying, but it's not that I don't love what I do. It's not that I don't love working. It's that I love other things too. Like, I love my family, and I love moving my body, and I love being outdoors, and I love yoga, and I love cooking and baking. Like, I love doing those things. And I love traveling and wandering and learning new things to experience. Like, it's not that I don't love working. It's that, I love other things too. And so probably the biggest thing that people, before they even make the transition, the biggest thing that people are doing is that they're very attached to meaningless tasks. Most of us are. And at Wealth University, we help our students to identify, like, what are the things that you're spending time doing that are actually helping you to reach your goals. Like when you look back over the last week, what were the things you wanted to accomplish? What were the things that you said, this is the tangible outcome I wanted? And then looking back, which of the things you spent time doing actually contributed to that? Because I find, especially with like this information age that we're in, that people are spending hundreds of hours every month on social media posts or on newsletters or on blogs. And I'm not saying those things don't work for everybody. I'm just giving some examples of common ones that people are spending their time doing. And when I ask, did that help you to grow your business and achieve your goals? They either say, I don't know, or they tell me the million reasons why it could. And so I have a rule. If 3 weeks in a row you ask that question, what did I spend time doing that actually helps me to achieve my goals? And there's something in there. For example, for me, it was newsletters for a lot of years. So spending all this time creating a newsletter and making it perfect and linking it to different things and trying to sell this in the newsletter or blah, 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 all these different things. I was spending all this time doing it. And even though that wasn't, like, I didn't see any evidence that was helping me to grow my business, I was like, but everybody does a newsletter. That's like gold. Like everyone says that. Your list is gold. And so I have this story about why spending time with that thing would eventually help me to grow my business. So I created this rule of, if you're spending time doing something 3 weeks in a row that didn't help you to actually directly achieve your goals and grow your business, or, achieve whatever goal it was in your corporate job, 3 weeks in a row, if it shows up as something you spent time doing and it didn't help you achieve something, it's time to let it go. Like, it's time to let it go. That thing doesn't help you. It might help 95% of other people, which I would disagree with in many ways. I just think people say everyone does this, so I actually do. But it might help a whole bunch of other people. But for you, it's not working. Like, just admit that. Be okay with that. And just do the things that work for you. We're so attached to doing meaningless tasks that we fill up our days, like the majority of our days when we first started teaching this concept to our Welch University students, the hustle-free concept. It was not what we originally planned to teach. It was just something that evolved in my own life, so we introduced it. We asked students to write down the number of things on their to-do list every day, like everything from our personal tasks, like doing laundry and doing dishes and helping kids with homework, to our business tasks, like writing the newsletter, coaching clients, whatever it is that your business is and what you spend time doing. And the average number of things on someone's daily to-do list was 52. 52. And we invited them originally to just bring that down to 7. That was the original invitation, to bring that down to 7. And people lost their minds. Like,
I'm totally thinking about my to-do list today. And I'm like, oh my God, crazy woman. How do you narrow that down to 7? So I'm so those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've challenged myself very recently to narrow it down to 2. That's why I say that I only work a couple of hours a week now. And that's how I did it, was I narrowed it down to 2. And there are a number of different things that happen in that. Number one, when you narrow your list, like when you really are honest about the number of things you expect yourself to do, you can understand why you're so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Like most of us are overwhelmed all the time and stressed all the time. Like an hour of yoga helps us just to decompress slightly, but it doesn't really help us to, relax and actually feel the sense of rejuvenation. Like, we're having very little rejuvenation in this entrepreneur world, or just in general, this goal achieving world. So that's the first thing. People are attached to meaningless tasks.
Okay. Can I butt in for one quick second? Because there's one piece that I don't want people to lose in what you just said. And you were talking about people feeling overwhelmed, like they're looking at these 52 things and they're feeling completely overwhelmed. I would hypothesize that a number of people who are in that position, and I'm just going to go ahead and project my feelings potentially onto other people, but I think we as people look at our own personal situation and we think, oh my gosh, I feel overwhelmed because I'm not handling this well. Other people can handle this better than me. It must be a fault in me. It must be something that I'm not good at. And that's why it's overwhelming. What we don't say is 52 things is overwhelming. That's too many things.
Yeah, and no one actually does them.
No, it's overwhelming because it is. We don't say that.
Right. Yeah, and the other interesting part of that, when it comes to the attachment, the next part of that is when someone's willing to admit that they're doing a bunch of meaningless shit every day, they then transition into, and most of my clients go through this. I can't think of a single client that we've introduced this concept to that has not gone through this, is they begin to feel a sense of devastation or loss because our worth and how attached we are to making money, how we actually feel like if we're not doing much, I must not be worthy of making any more money, because what am I doing? Like, I'm not doing anything. And so then people make this mistake of assuming that what their worth or what their business value is, or what the work they're doing and what they're creating in their life is, worthy of and deserving of, and the number that we might put the value on, that it's attached to how much they do every day. And if they're not doing much, they must not be worth much. And so then there's like this period of nothingness that happens where we realize we don't have that much to do. And people go one of two ways. They either go back to doing a lot, and it might not be in their business because they've realized that they didn't have to do that much in their business in order to make money. It might not be in their business, but it might be in other things. That they find other ways to fill their time, because if I'm not doing anything, I'm not worth anything. And so we go from feeling overwhelmed to like worthlessness almost.
That's so totally insightful, because you hear people say, oh, you have to know the difference between being busy and being productive. And I agree with that. But the way that you put it around this really psychological need to fill that time and the attachment that we have, I love that word, the attachment that we have to feeling busy and having a lot going on, that really adds a little layer to it. It's not completely just that we don't recognize it. It's that there's sort of an emotion there that it's feeding. It's not just that we don't know it's there. It's that in some ways we need it emotionally. And that's really insightful.
Yeah. And that need to feel needed. Like, that's one of the 6 human needs.
Totally.
Is needing to feel needed. And especially for women, I've found that, that is fulfilled by doing things, whether it's in the home and we're cleaning up, or it's in our business and we're providing a service or providing a product or creating that. Like, we're filling that. And I'm not proposing that people just sit around and do nothing. But an interesting thing has happened for me in the process of like discovering this whole concept myself. And that is that I've had to be willing to let there be a period of nothing, and then a period of trial and error of what will be next. And the patience required to make that transition to going from doing everything because everyone told me I needed to do it, to realizing what actually needed to be done in order to accomplish my goals, and recognizing how easy that was, that it wasn't that difficult, to having there be very little in my daily life, because everything I was spending my time doing, there were, only a select few I needed to do anymore. To then begin to hear within myself, not just like, okay, well, you have time to go to the gym and work out, because that's what everybody does, and that's what you should be doing, because that's where, like, it would make sense if you're not working that much that you're, like, super fit, right? Like, having this, like, whole thing come up about now what should I be doing? There's this period of nothingness that has to happen, where you can then listen and say, okay, well, if I don't have to do all this stuff, which is the biggest mistake, really answering your initial question, the biggest mistake that people make in that transition is feeling attached to how they have to make money, which is I have to have the perfect business and have to express my passion in the perfect way, or I have to have this job be exactly what I want it to be, or I have to, whatever we're telling ourselves, being attached to the way we make money. Because I can assure you, after the years that I've done business coaching and teaching people in Wealth University, as well as the experience I have for myself, making money is super easy. But finding work you love to do and not making that depend on money is entirely different. And I think sometimes we put so much pressure on the thing we're passionate about to make us money and make plenty of it, that we stop loving the thing that we originally were so passionate about, because we're forcing it to make money. That's probably the biggest mistake that people make, and it's one that I made, very much so. Because sometimes when we force the thing that we love so much to make money for us, we're going to see the ugly parts and we're going to see the beautiful parts of it. we're going to see the parts that we love so much, but we're also going to spend time in the things that we didn't love so much, that we never had to spend that much time in. We're going to have to do both. So feeling attached to how we make money is sometimes the biggest mistake that people make when they make this transition, is to say, okay, well, not only do I have to move on with this concept of not having to work that hard, but I also have to make sure that I'm making money the way I want to make it. And sometimes that can make money making really difficult. And money making is like a super easy part. Does that make sense, April?
Totally. Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so for me, this period of nothingness and then this like idea of like, okay, well, if it's easy for me to make money, one of the ways that I opted to make it more difficult to make money yet again was to say, okay, now what am I passionate about and how do I need to build a business around that? And how can I pour myself into that? Blah, 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 blah. Rather than just saying, it's easy for me to make money right now. Like that's the easiest part. So now what are some of the things that I would love to spend my time doing? And they're not going to be what everybody else likes to spend their time doing. It's going to look different for everybody else. I'm going to give it permission to try things that maybe no one else is doing. I'm going to give that permission. And then we begin to try out some things that we love. And I was talking to somebody the other day about the fact that the normal American lifestyle, there are other countries who adopt this too, but the normal American lifestyle is to work from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. And then if you work out in any way, shape, or form, there's an hour either before or after your workday where you work out. And then there's a couple of hours you spend with your family maybe, or yourself, reading or watching TV or whatever it is. That's not a well-balanced life. If you look at that, majority of hours are spent at work. So beginning to toy with the concept of what if I spent just as much time moving my body and taking care of myself as I spent at work? What if I spent just as much time cultivating my inner relationship with myself and doing the things that I love to do by myself? What if I spent just as much time doing that? And then also just as much time with people I love? What if I had that kind of life? What would that look like for me? And there's trial and error in that through that transition, where you go from having a lot to do to having nothing to do to eventually having, an ever evolving life. Like I said, it's always changing for me of what it means to live hustle free and how many hours are spent in different things. But how does it then look? You give yourself permission to do trial and error and then create a daily life that's well balanced, that reflects who you are right now, and then allows you to kind of figure it out even more as you go. What would that look like? So I hope that answers your question. It was just like a really long way to do it. but I think that's kind of the evolution that's happened for me, and where I see people make mistakes by all means are like being attached to those meaningless tasks, being attached to how they make money in the long run, and then making it complicated in the process.
So I'm thinking back that's beautiful. And I'm not a journalist, so I get into situations like these and I'm like, oh my God, I have about 9 different questions. And it's really hard for me to rein it in. The first thing that pops to mind, actually, you mentioned this void. When I got out of graduate school, graduate school is this whole, you're being held underwater and really immersed in a particular subject, but your to-do list is always what you need to get done in a given 24-hour period is always about 4 days worth of work. So there's no chance. I mean, zero chance. It never gets shorter. And the best you can hope is that you keep your head above water for enough time to gulp in enough air that you can still stay afloat. Sort of.
Yeah.
So it's exactly that lifestyle you described. And I remember defending my dissertation. I had to go to Nebraska to do that. I came back home to Minneapolis. I was sitting on the couch and I was trying to watch TV, and it's the void that you mentioned. I was trying to watch TV, and for the first time ever, I didn't have I was sitting on the couch trying to watch TV, but 2, I didn't have a journal article next to me. I wasn't trying to write while I was doing it. I wasn't not even doing 2 tasks at once, like triple tasking for the first time in a handful of years. And I realized that I couldn't watch TV like a normal person. I had to decompress and sort of go through this reentry process of being a normal human after that. And I totally hear that in what you're saying, that gap and that void is really uncomfortable.
It is, and I love that you have that experience, because typically I find that people shame themselves for that period. They're like, oh my God, I should be doing more. Oh my gosh, like I'm useless. Like I'm not doing anything. And then so that we just begin to fill up our days because we feel worthless, or because we feel useless, or because we're shaming ourselves that we're in that phase, rather than be patient and just tell ourselves like, I require this period of time, when I was my very first like nomadic trip, right? So I bought a one-way ticket to Paris. I flew to Paris, and through that, I went to all these different places. And I was going to do this pass through in this town called Byron Bay, Australia, which is my absolute favorite to date. And I will probably forever love Byron, and it'll forever feel like home to me. But I was only supposed to do a pass through for like 3 days. And I got there and I like knew that I wasn't leaving. I was like, I'm never leaving. Like my family needs to helicopter themselves here because I'm like, this is where I belong. And Byron is a really spiritual place, and it's a really clearing place, and it's also a place where you like face your shit head on. For some reason, there's something about that place that just makes you face everything. And what happened for me there, because of the fact that it was such a healing place, and everyone did yoga and everyone meditated, and there was so much quiet, and there were no televisions, and I didn't have a cell phone at the time. There was like just no distraction really. Is I remember thinking one time, like, it is taking me like the first time that I started to notice it was like 2 months in. So it was probably like it took me a solid 5 to 6 months to even begin to recover from the stresses of normal living,
Wow.
like of the constant go, 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 of the constant conversation that goes on, of the constant stream of information going into my brain, of the requirements that I was putting on my body to work out in certain ways. Just like so many different things that I was doing that normal people do, that average people do, that in that quiet, I found that it was so like, I became so aware of stresses that had become normal. Does that make sense?
Yes, completely.
Stresses that had
Completely.
become so normal that I didn't even notice them anymore. Like the smallest thing, like multitasking, became overwhelming for the best of all reasons. Because I was so focused and so present on what I was doing in particular moments that if two things happened at once, I would step back and be like, whoa, I'm not present here. And I don't like that. Like that feels weird to me. And that's a normal thing. That's one thing that's like I still multitask. I'm not saying I'm by any means that I'm like present with everything, but I still notice that. But the stresses of normal living, how much it just took me to decompress from that. And a lot of us get really uncomfortable in that space, understandably so. But it's important when you begin to transition away from doing so much and then realizing that you don't have to do that much in order to be successful. Like in that transition, it's important to give yourself that decompression, that nothingness, that recovery time from the stresses of what you just came out of.
I can totally see that. Okay, so now
Mm-hmm.
you have me completely curious. And one of the things that I love about this podcast is that it serves as almost a set of examples to my audience to say, whatever big goal you have, whatever the thing that you want to do or the passion that you have or whatever, here are some examples of women who are doing big things or chasing their passion or doing something interesting or going against the grain or being loud or whatever it is. Here's some examples of women who are doing that so that you can kind of get it in your mind that this is not impossible. There is someone who's
Mm-hmm.
done it, which means that there's a path there for you. So I want to
Mm-hmm.
get a little bit tactical. I'm wondering if you're willing to share your journey. So go back to the beginning. How did you get started in this? And what did this journey look like for you in particular as an individual? Because I'm hearing you say this and it's blowing my mind. And I'm thinking like, how is this even possible? How did she do this? And like, what do you do day to day? Like, I'm really curious about your individual experience and journey.
Yeah, so there's a lot of parts to the story, and I think the part you're asking about is the more recent one. So I'll kind of fast forward through the beginning stages and focus on that part. Um, I was working in not-for-profits in Michigan, where I'm from, which I'm actually at right now, and I was working in not-for-profits, and I had so much promise to be one of the top executives there. I was well on my way. I was moving up the ranks, and I just knew there was a particular day or a particular week where we had to track our hours when I worked for this particular organization. And there was a week that I tracked 117 hours, which people ask me now, how is that even possible? And I couldn't answer that question for you. It's just what I worked that week. And I tracked 117 hours. And at the staff meeting that day where we handed them in, they had a celebration for me
What?
of how committed I was. And that day I put in my 2 weeks. I was like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? Like, this is insane. I'm literally dedicating my life to this organization and being celebrated for it. And I don't even think I like this. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing. And, and so I literally got in the car and I packed 2 boxes in that car and started driving. And I didn't know where I was going to go. And I kind of just wandered from there and wandered to different states. And I ended up running out of money in Texas and had to pick up this nanny job while I was in Texas and lived with the family. And while I was there, somehow I got this email. I don't even remember how I got signed up for it. I think it was like someone else I was signed up for on their newsletter, but they were having a guest person write. And in the email, I don't remember what the email said, but it signed off. It said her name and it signed off as a coach. And I didn't know what that was at the time. And I just got curious and kind of inquired and reached directly out to that woman and asked her about what coaching school she went to and what it meant. And I just knew that was definitely the route for me. I ended up going to a couple of different really intense coaching schools, evolved from that place. And I just felt ready at about a year and a half of study to open my coaching business. And I was really successful really fast, which brought with it working a lot. Like, I went from being a nanny and doing that full time to having to quit so that I could start my business. And in that process, I moved a couple of times, and I was with my now ex-husband at the time, and he had a really big dream. And so we were moving around the country to support his dream and really just dedicating my life to living dreams. Like, that was where I was at, and that's what I was dedicated to. And I was working quite a few hours. Like I said, it was like 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. once I kind of got it under control. So it wasn't bad at all after a while, but it was exhausting work. Like, it was very healing work. I was accepting a lot of energy from other people. I was packing a lot into a small amount of time. I was creating constantly. Even when I wasn't working, I was writing about something. Like, it was a very exciting time for me. But after a year or so of doing that, it was also a very exhausting time for me. And what happened after that was I started to show signs of burnout. And I traveled back to Michigan for a month to just be away from everything. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I just needed to get out of the city and just be in a place that was quiet. So I went back to Michigan, and I was in my aunt's basement doing some recovery. She had a yoga room and just a very relaxing space. I was doing some recovery from that. That month that I was stepping back and saying, I'm getting tired. I'm getting really tired, like, to the extent that I can't wake up sometimes and can't get out of bed. And I started asking myself this question, like, okay, I know that I'm building something that I like, that I really like to spend time in, and I love working with these people. Now, how can I change it? How can I transform it in a way that allows me to be a human being? That was a question that I started asking, because I realized that I was treating myself like a machine. I was requiring myself to be up at a particular time every day and get myself prepared mentally, every single day in the same way, and be super excited and be really motivated and help these people. And if I didn't show up, I couldn't make money. And if they needed me and I wasn't there, they left. Like, I just was in this place that everything was so dependent on me being physically present and mentally on top of things, that I was like, that's slightly unrealistic. Like, I'm not saying it's not a good goal to have, that people depend on me, or that I'm mentally in a great place every day, but I'm showing signs that it's unrealistic to expect that of myself every single day. I need to allow myself to be human. And some of that has to do with acknowledging that there are good circumstances in life and there are rough circumstances in life. Both circumstances sometimes take time and energy. And one of them was, at the time, for example, I was planning my wedding, and I wanted to give time to that. And another one was, my sister was running her first half marathon, and I wanted to give time to that. I wanted to be able to travel for that. And others were things like, I was exhausted. That circumstance wasn't a good one. I was exhausted. I didn't want to work. I didn't have the energy to work. It was taking me forever. Like, there are good circumstances, there are rough circumstances that we're facing, and both of them were taking my energy at the time. And I just kept thinking, there's got to be a way for me to sustain this business without having to physically be there all the time, but be able to give some energy to these circumstances that are popping up. And that's really where Wells University was born, and the concept of Wells University being an online school for entrepreneurs. So it was a place where people could come and I could grow my business without it, depending on the number of hours that I was working. And for everybody, it looks different. If they ask themselves that question, what can I do to make this, allow myself to be a human being through this? We've helped people who do brick and mortar shops. We've helped people who have online businesses, who are in tech and inviting investors to invest in them, people who just do every kind of business. We've helped them to answer that question for themselves. And I started asking that question really at the perfect time for me because, a year later, some unfortunate things happened and I went through a really rough and surprising divorce, and it knocked me clear on my ass, like where I just was so confused about life and so confused about where I was headed. Everything that I planned for my future in my business and everything just felt completely unclear. And I just wanted to get away. And so where Wells University was kind of the first, how can I allow this to not require my physical presence? I was still working a similar number of hours, but I wasn't as exhausted. It was a little more productive for me. I went very drastically the other direction and said, I think I'm only going to work like a couple of hours a day, 3 days a week, and I'm going to travel. Like, I think that's what I need right now. And I bought this one-way ticket to Paris, and I didn't know if it was going to be possible to run my business that way. If people were going to feel like I was forgetting them, if I wasn't going to produce that much work, if everything was going to fall apart. Like, I really didn't know at the time, but it's really evolved into a beautiful thing, and it's really opened my eyes to the fact that every phase of pulling away things to do in my business, at every phase of it, whether it just be like pulling away at things to do so that I could work 10 to 2, pulling away at things so that I could work 1 day a week and recover for the other 6 days because I was burnt out, pulling away to say I only have a couple of hours a few days a week because I need to travel and get my mind on something else. Like, pulling away at each of those layers, it's been a really beautiful discovery that my income didn't have to be affected by those changes. On many occasions, it actually increased because of those decisions, because it gave me more freedom, it gave me more flexibility to serve more people, to reach bigger goals, and then in some of those cases, hire other people to do the things that I wasn't doing anymore. That wasn't the case at first, but it eventually became the case. So really, it just has been this beautiful evolution of stepping back and saying, my story has very much been an evolution and evidence to the fact that life happens, and it's important to build a business that allows it to happen, or else you're either going to become completely dedicated to your business and you're not going to have much else, or you're going to, as many people do as you get older, compromise what your dream is and say, I don't have to have this because I want the other things. And, everybody's evolution of that is completely different, but mine has been really beautiful. And I've just never allowed my mind to go into the place and say, this means I have to compromise the amount of money I can make or how much I have to work in order to make that money. And it's kind of just taken on its own from there, very much so.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that journey. Cause it's, the ups and the downs, because, it's helpful to hear the journey that other people have gone on. It's easy to look at the place that someone who's really successful, the place that they're at right now, and think, oh my gosh, I could never get there because they're so different than me. But, when you talk through that, you've faced challenges too. You've faced uncertainty too. You've faced barriers for sure. And, that's something that feels much more familiar to people is the process of getting there, not just the destination at the end.
Absolutely. That's another thing. Like, we get really obsessed with how something happens, not just what's going to happen, but how it happens. And, I set intentions and I set goals and I have big dreams, just like probably everybody listening to this podcast. And one thing that I'm sure we can all relate to is the fact that it didn't happen the way we thought it was going to. And that's okay. It doesn't mean it's never going to happen, right? It just means that there are going to be things along the way. And it's important to just recognize that not only are we headed where we want to go, but it does look messy, and it looks messy for everybody else too. It's all right. Don't let that stop you.
Yeah. I used to answer the question, oh, where do you see yourself in a year or 3 years or 5 years? That typical, hey, are you a planful future focused person. And I would say I am planful and future focused, but I used to answer that question the way that you're supposed to. And I would come up with some goals and, say, here's my plan and this is the path that I'm on. These days I've gotten a lot more honest about it. And really the answer that I want to give someone anytime I get that question is, oh, that's so cute that you think it would actually turn out the way that I would describe. It doesn't matter how much I plan. I have never at any point in time, if I look back 1 year or 3 years, I would never have thought that I was going to be in the place that I am now a year ago or 2 years ago, even. So I'm not planning that far ahead.
Yeah, I think it's, that's very much changed for me as well. So the evolution of what's happened for my world, because I was very much a very strategic planner. I still am a very tangible goal setter. Like if I can't measure it, it's kind of a useless goal to me, because measurement really allows me to see whether or not I'm on track or not. I'm very much like that, but I think that curiosity is key. Like being absolutely certain about things is really beautiful, but make sure you're absolutely certain about what it is that you want really. And don't be so absolutely certain about how you're going to achieve it, the way you're going to achieve it, the steps you're going to take to get there, the whole plan along along the path, and exactly the landmarks you're going to hit. Because curiosity is key. It might evolve and change and interest you in something else and transform into something you weren't planning. So it's okay to have this is where I'm headed, but be curious along the path. And if something catches your eye, give yourself the freedom to say, hey, it might be this too. It might be this instead. And I give myself that flexibility.
I love that. So speaking about goals, and you mentioned it a little bit before that you're working on becoming a writer and learning how to do that. What is your next goal?
Yeah, so my biggest thing right now is becoming a published author. So I'm very much in full fledged of becoming just a great writer and practicing that skill and learning about that skill and figuring out how I write and what I write and just all those kinds of things. That's very much what's next for me is being a published author.
That's awesome. I love it. And I love that you're moving into a space that it's not completely out of left field from what you're doing, but it's definitely not comfort zone. That's for sure.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. And every time that something like reveals itself of this is next, I'm an avid reader and love philosophers, and Henry David Thoreau is one of my favorite people to read about. Ralph Waldo Emerson, like that whole era, and the people that were in Concord, Massachusetts at the time. But he wrote this essay, Henry David Thoreau did, called Walden, after he had lived in the woods for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. He wrote this essay, the kind of a conclusion to his time there. And he said that I'm leaving the woods for the same reason that I came here, because I have many lives to live and I have no more time to waste than the one that I've been living. And I think that's been really important for me to acknowledge, because starting over sucks. I promise that. It's not my favorite thing to do in the whole world. It's really uncomfortable to not be good at something. It's really uncomfortable to not have my name attached to something that's already successful in the world, like I did before. Be known for something. It's really difficult for people to ask how what I've done before is doing, and me to say, it's complete and it's doing well, and this is where it's headed without me. It's an interesting place to be in for those things. But the truth is that I've lived the life of a business coach. I've had that phase of my life. I feel grateful for it. And I don't feel like I have any more time to waste in it. So it's time to start over, to be new, and to give myself permission to figure that one out too.
Oh my gosh, my heart just exploded. I love that so much. I'm a huge believer that, we have such a short amount of time, to be here. And it's a bit metaphysical to talk about, but it is, life is very short. And when there was this interesting book and blog posts that were written about the things that people, as they're dying, the things that they regret. And one of the things, two of the things that are frequently on that list are working too much. So spending too much time, giving too much of your precious time to your job, if it's not the most fulfilling thing. And then also worrying too much about what other people think of you and letting them dictate how you live and how you spend your day. And I just hear in your story so many pieces of evidence of you just shedding both of those things and really just living this life in a way that you needed to live it so that it's fulfilling.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I hope that I inspire other people to do the same. It's just as confusing on the inside, everyone. Just so you know. So you don't feel don't assume I've got it figured out and I'm doing that intentionally. I am, however, very, very committed to being very honest and very raw with people about where I'm at, and if I feel done with something, being done with something, if I feel ready for something, being ready for something, and if I feel curious about something, exploring that very much so.
That's phenomenal. So
Hmm.
we've talked about it a little bit, and maybe maybe we would just be reiterating, but I feel like you would be a person who would have some really great uh, parting guidance. So great words of wisdom for other women. Think back on your journey, on the things you've learned from your clients, the things you've learned from people who have gone through Wealth University. What advice do you have for other women?
Probably the biggest piece of advice I have right now is to think for yourself, and that is comes with many different angles. One of them is, something that's been very loud for me lately is that I never, at a level that I have right now, recognized how much marketing has influenced, and being around other people has influenced, and seeing how others lived has influenced what I feel like I should have or should be doing.
Mm.
Um, and so my taking a break from that and traveling around the world for a little more than a year really helps me with that. And I'm not saying you have to travel around the world or completely remove yourself from those things, but like really stepping back and thinking for yourself and saying, I get that that's how a lot of people live, or I get that's what marketing shows me I should want, or, that body or that amount of money or that lifestyle. I understand that. But, working with hundreds of entrepreneurs, they all wanted very similar things. And that to me says that people have forgotten what they want and they've attached themselves to what they think they should want. When everybody wants the same thing, it's a little curious to me. And that is, a 6-figure or 7-figure income, depending on where they're at, a luxurious lifestyle, meaning they can buy the car they want, they can have the house they want, things like that, and to be recognized in some way for the work that they're doing, whether it be that they're on stage or they're a New York Times bestseller, or that they're on an Amazon bestseller list, or whatever it is. It just depends on the entrepreneur and what work they're in. But it's very curious to me when everybody wants the same thing. So make sure you think for yourself and you actually are stepping in the direction of the things that you want. And then the other part of that is very much like allow things like this podcast, because I think they're so amazing. Like, April, what you're doing in the world is so great.
Thank you.
This podcast or books that you read or anything like that, like, have enough of a gauge in yourself to know where you're headed and what you want. Don't look to those things to fill in the gap for you of what it is that you want and how you're going to think about things. So know yourself enough so that these kinds of things can kind of just help support what you believe or help contribute to the things that you're wanting to accomplish, rather than looking to them for all the answers, because you're just not going to find them there. And if you do, you're going to be right back in the same place in a year.
That's great advice. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we're wrapping up today, I have just one final question for you. We are compiling a Spotify Power playlist that is comprised of songs that have all been curated by the amazing women who I have had just the incredible honor to interview on this podcast. So, I have to ask for your contribution to the playlist.
I could literally list like 30 songs. I have a positivity playlist that is pretty much in my ear obsessively, and it's what I travel with and like puts me in the best mood all the time. So I will tell you my favorite. One of them is "Good to Be Alive" by Andy Grammer. Pretty much anything Andy Grammer does is pretty fantastic. Nice. Yeah, "Good to Be Alive" is probably my favorite. And then the other one, actually the one that you probably will not hear from anyone else, and I'll just throw this one out there because of that. There's this woman, her name is Irene Boggs, and she created this music concept called Affirmajams.
Huh.
And it's all affirmations within upbeat music.
Nice.
And so she has a variety of different songs on iTunes, but she was one of the first people who kind of added to my positivity playlist. So anything by Irene Boggs for sure.
I love it. That's awesome. I will definitely add them to our playlist. And I appreciate you for sharing, or appreciate that you shared it with us.
Yeah. Yes. Happy
Well,
to do it.
thank you so much, seriously, for being here today. Your story is amazing, and the message that you have is one that I know that we all need to hear, in that there is another path and that there's a way to do this without being so completely frazzled. And also, if you're feeling frazzled and you're feeling overwhelmed, it's because it's overwhelming. It's not because, there's part of you that just can't handle it, because we do let ourselves get so busy and try to cram way too much into every single day. So I appreciate you being here and sharing these amazing lessons with us. Where can people find you?
April. So the best place to find me is amandaloveland.com, amandaloveland.com, and that'll direct you to all the other channels that I have.
Nice. And I'll be sure to link to that on your show notes page as well, so it's easy for people to find you.
Great.
Cool. Well, like I said, thank you so much for being here today, and I so appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, April. And thanks, everybody, for listening.
I really hope you had fun meeting Amanda Loveland. It's interviews like this one that make me think about how I structure my day and how I think about my work and my value. I'm completely guilty of tying my personal sense of value to the number of hours that I've worked in a day. I'm also really guilty of letting activities slip into my day that might not be serving me in one way or another. And Amanda's messages were just a great reminder to me to be more mindful about what I spend my time on and who I spend it with, so that I can have enough margin in my day to hang out with my friends and my family and my loved ones. Now, if you want to learn a bit more about Amanda or how to build a hustle-free empire, you can visit her at www.amandaloveland.com. Before we wrap up today, I just want to take a minute to thank all of you who are listening, and to extend a special thank you to those of you who've taken a minute to leave me a rating or a comment. I took a peek at iTunes the other day and I saw such a heartwarming comment. It read, "April Seifert is a vibrant, brilliant woman who is bringing her passion and positivity to everyone with this podcast and movement. The takeaway messages and themes from these interviews leave me feeling pumped up, ready, and capable of making changes and connecting with the world. Definitely worth the listen." It was just so wonderful to read, and I can't thank you enough to whomever wrote that comment. I so appreciate hearing from you. The ratings and reviews that you leave help my podcast come up when people are searching for content like mine, and it helps me think about the types of women who I might bring on as guests, so I really appreciate it. And by taking a minute to leave me a rating, you're helping me share these stories with a wider audience. Last note that I want to say is I'd love to stay in touch. You can connect with me by signing up to receive updates at aprilseifert.com, or by joining us on the Women Inspired Podcast Facebook page at facebook.com/Women Inspired Podcast. I hope to see you there, and have an inspired week.